Recently, I curated and released a Drones and Tones sample pack recorded from the WMD Synchrodyne and Expander. The Synchrodyne is a quirky beast, and with the added expander module, it becomes even more eccentric. They are an excellent combo for gritty and industrial sounds that are surprisingly lively and organic. As a synth voice, it can be very difficult to tame, but it offers a wide variety of tones that exist somewhere in the no man's land between analog and digital, due to the fact that its architecture is based on a switched capacitor filter where the cutoff frequency is controlled by a phase-locked loop clocked by a VCO. Among other things, the optional expand module adds an additional phase-locked loop, another VCO, another filter, and an optical compressor circuit. All of the Synchrodyne samples I'll be working with in this session were recorded directly from one or more outputs of the Synchrodyne and/or Expand, often with some self-patching and a small amount of external modulation. The samples that I recorded from the Synchrodyne, where a tuner could identify a distinct pitch, are labeled with the approximate equal-tempered A equals 440 Hz note value. I'm starting from a blank project, so I'm going to set the Octatrack to 24-bit operation, and I'm also going to turn on dynamic recorders and set the reserve length to 0, so that I don't run into any problems loading up the entire sample pack. If you want to quickly load a lot of files into Octatrack flex or static slots, make sure they are all stored in the same folder first. You can then simply alternate between hitting the yes button and the down button. Just make sure not to do it too fast. Longer samples will take a bit more time to load and could mess up your rhythm. When scrolling through the sample slot list or inside the Octatrack file manager, holding function while pressing the up or down arrow will quickly page through the entries. Now it's time to audition these samples and try to pick one to start with. I think I like this sort of pulse width modulation sound, so I'll assign that to the flex machine. And now into grid record mode. I'm feeling quite a bit faster than usual today, so I think I'm going to crank up this tempo. Somewhere in the low 170s is probably a good place. Now to throw down some trigs and start the sequencer. Now let's see how we can take this rich raw tone and transform it into something more musically relevant. I'll start by shaping the amplitude envelope a bit. I'm most likely going to add some reverbs or delays later. Since this particular tone varies a bit over time, using the start parameter can be very useful. I'm going to set the start position to its central value and start sending some modulation to it. I want the start position to stay constant for each trigger, so I'm going to set it to hold behavior. Now I need to adjust the speed and depth a bit to find a good modulation relationship. Okay, that's a little bit spicier. Might as well try to tweak the central start position a bit though. And I also want to lengthen the envelope. Try softening the attack. That's not terrible. Let's engage the filter. The filter resonance is interacting very nicely with this raw tone. Now it's time to see what happens if we adjust the pitch of the sample. Let's see how this interacts with some delay repeats. I don't think I'm going to get much mileage out of that. Let's try a reverb instead. Yeah, I'm definitely having more fun now. Always pay careful attention to the shelving frequency of the dark reverb. In certain situations, it can have very dramatic effects. Let's go back to that filter. Time to revisit the amplitude envelope. Now I'm curious how much of an effect adjusting the start position modulation will have. Now to try some pitch P-locks. I'm not looking for anything melodic, mostly just to change the texture around. Now to mess with that filter again. Let's see what happens to the texture of the sound when we take away a lot of the low frequencies. The character of the Synchrodyne sound is really coming through here. It's very gritty and crunchy, but it has sort of round edges. Using very fast retriggering times results in essentially a low-budget wavetable. That's pretty nice right there. Since my envelope is fairly short at the moment, turning up the retriggering amount doesn't really matter right now. And back to the filter again. I'm liking this wash of sound. It has a pretty cool texture. So now I'm thinking it's time to do some sort of a beat. Instead of taking the time to repurpose these Synchrodyne drones and tones into percussive sounds, I'm going to load some samples from my processed loop packs using the Tiptop drum modules. I'm going to leave time stretch on, so I'm going to page down to the faster tempo samples so that they don't experience as many artifacts. That one's pretty cool. Let's go with it. Put a trig down on the first of the bar. Now to jazz up the pattern a little. And I'll put some conditional trigs in here to give it some more variation over time. Time to engage the filter. Add some filter envelope depth. That's good enough for now. I want to add some more effects to my original textural sound. So I'll put a neighbor machine on track 2. Not sure I want to keep this filter. Taking a quick look at the source track. I think a compressor for the first effect slot would make some sense. Planning to use this a bit more experimentally, so I'll leave the RMS at 0. Going to dial in a bit of gain reduction, and then I'm going to start sending some modulation to the gain parameter. I want to try modulating the gain of the compressor by using an inverse exponential envelope. Using this technique can give you pseudo sidechaining effects, but that's not how I'm going to use it here. I'm going to set the trig mode to 1, and then I need to get some trigs on this neighbor track to trigger that envelope. Not getting much effect yet because the gain parameter of the compressor is at 0. Now it's very easy to hear the effect of that inverse exponential envelope on the gain. The interaction of the compressor gain reduction envelope with this triggered gain reduction envelope gives a lot of cool results. Now I want to make the pattern on the neighbor track to be cross-rhythmic with the pattern on the source track. So now I'm going into the pattern settings and enabling per track scale. Function and the up and down arrow allows you to quickly adjust the master track length. And now I'm going to shorten the length of the neighbor track pattern. Might be time to change up some of these trigs. We need to fatten up that drum loop considerably, so let's add a compressor to it. I often tend to enjoy a compressor somewhere between peak sensing and RMS. Now to tighten up that amplitude envelope. Let's filter this down a bit, and this track will be dedicated a bit more for the lower frequencies. Now to revisit our original Synchrodyne sound again. I'm starting to get a bit concerned that I'm clipping the outputs of the Octatrack, so I'm going to set up a resampling channel to take a look at the main output. Note that when you're in the recording setup menu, the track and bank/edit button combo actually takes you to the record buffer and not the sample that's assigned to the track. Looks like I'm safe from clipping for now. Let's engage another effect on that neighbor track. A chorus can often give interesting results on this type of thick texture. The chorus is bringing a nice emphasis and width to the metallic overtones, but I'm feeling something a bit messier. Pretty underwhelmed by this delay. Maybe adjusting the source track compressor will help. That cleaned it up a bit at the cost of some of the dynamics, though. I'm getting a little bit tired of the wash caused by the dark reverb, so I'm going to switch to the plate reverb and see if a gated reverb can give me a bit more control. The plate reverb is also a bit more metallic, and I'm interested in bringing out a bit more of that quality in the sound. I'm trying to find a nice sweet spot for this compressor's gain value. If the gain value is too low or too high, I lose a lot of the dynamics that I'm trying to put in there by using modulation. I'm going to take that delay off. It's just not really doing anything for me. Something else would be more useful. I'm not sure exactly what I want to use here. I want to keep emphasizing the metallic nature of the sound, but I also want to add some spaciousness that I lost when I removed the dark reverb. Maybe another plate reverb will do the trick. I'm going to set it to full mono so it doesn't mess with the stereo image. I don't want a big wash of sound, so I'm going to take that gate way down. Now to clean it up and emphasize a particular frequency range with some filtering. I'm really enjoying the robotic nature of this sound, and especially how the nature of the source samples makes it surprisingly warm. Now I'm feeling the need for some more percussion. Need some mid and high frequency percussion, setting this to a flex machine and leaving time stretch on. Maybe this time I'll try repurposing some of these Synchrodyne sounds. I think I want to use a bunch of different sounds at once in this track, so I'm going to switch to slots mode. Nothing's jumping out at me using slots mode, so I think it's time to just use another percussion loop. I'm going to load this at the end of the flex slot list. This one seems usable. Always love to try adjusting the start position on loops. Didn't really like any of that stuff though. Now it's time to tighten up the amplitude envelope. Now to band pass these percussions. Let's put some more of those Synchrodyne samples to work. I'm not muting any of my other tracks because I want to hear how these sounds interact with my existing battery. I'm looking for something that complements what's happening right now, but can also cut through it a bit. Really like how that one cuts through. Let's adjust that amplitude envelope. Now I'll try some pitch V-locks to bring some more variety. Now let's see what the filter does to this sound. very metallic. I like it. Using the delay with these sounds hasn't worked out too well so far, but I'll try again. Need to beef up that low frequency percussion some more. Okay, that's almost certainly clipping. Let's take a look. Yeah, I need to adjust my main output level a bit. I want that low frequency percussion to be a bit chunkier, so I'm going to turn up the hold time. And I'm thinking I want to increase the release time of the high frequency percussion. Now for some more processing on the high frequency percussion. I guess I don't need a neighbor track since I haven't assigned the second effect slot yet. I'll try a plate reverb. Now to adjust the gate value. A tight gate allows me to smear the percussive sound and create a spaciousness around it without affecting the rest of the mix that much. Let's see how that filter interacts with the plate reverb. Very cool. I want to put some modulation on that filter. I'm going to modulate the cutoff frequency of both the low pass and the high pass filter, but I'm going to do them a bit differently. The low pass filter will have a stepped modulation, while the high pass filter will have a free running modulation. Very nice filter movement. Let's put some filter modulation on the original Synchrodyne sound. Sweeping the filter frequency is allowing the resonance of the filter to interact very nicely with the source sample. I'm getting a bit bored of the higher frequency Synchrodyne sound, so time to mess with it some more. Not really feeling these uneven track lengths. I'll try some modulation instead. Let's try a square wave LFO sent to the pitch. There we go. That square wave LFO is mixing up the pattern nicely. Now let's try some filter modulation. Moving on to track 4 now. I'm going to turn it into a neighbor machine for some more effects. I'll try out a dark reverb first. I don't want that dark reverb just droning away, so I'm going to put some modulation on it. I'm enjoying this expansion and contraction of the reverb time. I want to mix up the synchronization with the source track though. Now I'll try modulating the reverb filter or the shelving frequency. still have a filter in the first effects slot of this neighbor track. Let's replace it with something a little spicier. Maybe I can bring some sort of tonality to this with a comb filter. Taking a quick look at the original Synchrodyne sample, if you were paying careful attention, you might remember it was an E flat. Let's hear what odd harmonics sound like by switching the feedback negative. Time to take down that comb filter pitch a couple octaves. And let's try some modulation on that comb filter. I think I'll try some fine-tune modulation first for a bit of vibrato. I'm going to set it to trig so that the vibrato restarts with every note. Now to turn down the depth, I only want a subtle vibrato. It adds a little bit of something something, but I need to get more mileage out of this LFO. Let's try a different destination. With the square wave modulation on feedback and the trig mode set to trig, we're getting a very interesting tremolo effect. However, the effect that I'm looking for right now is stepped modulation of the feedback. This feedback modulation is working out well. Let's try to fine-tune the central value a bit more. I'm going to try adjusting the source track's filter a bit. I'm really liking these deep, low swells of feedback. Time to take a look at the resample of our main outputs. A bit close to clipping, but isn't happening quite yet, so I'll leave it alone for the moment. I'm going to mess with the source track for the comb filter, see what variations are possible. This is probably a good opportunity to try out some scene variations. Scenes aren't just performance tools, they're also very useful for non-destructively trying out variations of your parts. Often, while attempting to create a build-up or breakdown scene, I'll get a completely different variation of my main idea that I actually like better than the original idea. When developing scenes, I tend to go for the parameters that are the most likely to have a dramatic effect on the sounds and pattern. Typically, these include things like filter cutoff frequencies, sample pitch, sample start position, delay or reverb times, wet-dry mix, and amplitude envelope parameters. Havhowever, it really depends quite a bit on how the sounds are constructed and what techniques I've employed to build the pattern. For example, since scene locks override the P-locks on individual triggers, if a sound has a parameter that has been P-locked differently for most or all of the trigs, then that's potentially an excellent target for scene locks in terms of creating a more dramatic variation.